Language, a cornerstone of human civilization, has a rich tapestry woven through millennia. The English language, a globally dominant force today, emerged from humble beginnings, its story an epic journey through time. To understand the fascinating history of the English language, we must first journey back to its roots, deep in the heart of ancient Eurasia. Our story begins with the Proto-Indo-European language, the ancestor of a vast family of languages spoken across Europe and parts of Asia. Around 5,000 years ago, on the steppes of Eurasia, nomadic tribes communicated in this ancient tongue. Over centuries, as these tribes migrated and interacted with other cultures, their language evolved and branched out. One such branch led to the Germanic languages, a group that would eventually give rise to English. Within the Germanic family, a sub-branch known as the West Germanic languages emerged, setting the stage for the birth of English as we know it. These West Germanic languages were spoken by tribes who inhabited the northern regions of Europe. Little did they know that their dialects, carried on the winds of migration and conquest, would one day evolve into a language spoken by billions worldwide. The 5th century AD marked a pivotal chapter in Britain's history, as Germanic tribes, primarily the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, crossed the North Sea. These invaders brought their language, a collection of West Germanic dialects.
Our dialects coalesced, forming Old English. Old English, spoken from the 5th to the 12th centuries, was far removed from modern English. Yet, it laid the foundation for a global language. Epic poems like Beowulf captured the spirit of the age.
The Roman Empire left an indelible mark on Britain's culture, infrastructure, and language. Latin influenced English vocabulary, especially in administration, law, and religion. Words like street, wall, and wine have Latin origins. Christian missionaries brought Latin, enriching English with religious terms. The Roman influence added complexity and sophistication to English. As the Anglo-Saxons were establishing their kingdoms and cultivating their language, a new force arose from across the North Sea, the Vikings. Hailing from Scandinavia, these fierce warriors embarked on daring raids and conquests, leaving a lasting impact on the course of English history. Beginning in the late 8th century, Viking longboats, sleek and menacing, began to appear on the horizon, carrying with them raiders eager for plunder and conquest. Coastal settlements were sacked, monasteries plundered, and terror spread throughout the land. The Vikings, however, were not merely ruthless barbarians. They were skilled seafarers, traders, and explorers, with a rich culture and language of their own. Their language, Old Norse, a North Germanic tongue closely related to Old English, would have a profound and lasting impact on the English language. As the Vikings established settlements and intermingled with the Anglo-Saxon population, their language began to weave its way into the fabric of English. The impact of the Viking invasions was not limited to mere raids and plunder. In the 9th century, Viking armies conquered large swaths of eastern and northern England, establishing a territory known as the Danelaw. Section 2. A linguistic fusion: Old Norse and Old English. The coexistence of Old Norse and Old English in the Danelaw and other areas of contact led to a fascinating linguistic phenomenon: language contact. As speakers of these two closely related Germanic languages interacted, their languages began to influence each other, borrowing words, phrases, and even grammatical structures. This linguistic fusion, while gradual and often subtle, left an indelible mark on the English language, shaping its vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. One of the most striking examples of Old Norse influence on English is in the realm of vocabulary. Hundreds of words in modern English can be traced back to Old Norse roots, including everyday words like sky, leg, take, get, and they. These words, once foreign to Anglo-Saxon ears, gradually became absorbed into the English lexicon, enriching the language and expanding its expressive range. The influence of Old Norse on English grammar, while less immediately apparent, was no less profound. Old Norse, with its simpler grammatical structure, is believed to have accelerated the shedding of inflections in English, a process already underway in the Old English period. This simplification of grammar, while perhaps lamented by purists, made English a more flexible and adaptable language, paving the way for its eventual global dominance. The Norman conquest, a linguistic earthquake. The year 1066 witnessed an event that forever altered English history and language. Led by William the Conqueror, the Normans vanquished the English forces at the Battle of Hastings. This seismic shift transformed English, infusing it with French vocabulary and cultural nuances.
The Norman conquest was a cultural and linguistic takeover. French became the language of power, relegating English to the lower classes. English borrowed words, phrases, and grammatical structures from French.
The rise of Middle English. The Norman conquest marked the transformation of Old English into Middle English. From the 12th to the 15th centuries, English evolved, absorbing Norman French elements. Middle English was dynamic, with regional variations and a simpler grammar. English remained the language of the common people, evolving in the shadow of Norman French. Over time, linguistic fusion began as Normans integrated into English society. Section 2. A transforming language, from inflection to simplification. One of the most significant developments in the evolution of Middle English was the gradual shedding of its complex system of inflections. Old English, like its Germanic cousins, was a heavily inflected language, relying on a complex system of grammatical endings or inflections to indicate the grammatical function of words in a sentence. Middle English, however, began to move away from this system, gradually simplifying its grammar and relying more on word order to convey meaning. This process of grammatical simplification, while multifaceted and not fully understood, was likely influenced by a number of factors. Contact with Old Norse, itself a less inflected language than Old English, may have played a role, as did the influence of French, which had already undergone significant grammatical simplification. Moreover, the very nature of language contact, with its inherent ambiguity and need for clarity, may have favored simpler, more regular grammatical structures. The loss of inflections in Middle English was not an overnight phenomenon, but rather a gradual process that unfolded over centuries. Noun endings that once indicated case, nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, gradually disappeared, as did many verb endings that marked person, first, second, third, and number, singular, plural. This simplification of grammar, while perhaps lamented by grammarians of the time, ultimately made English a more flexible and adaptable language. Section 3. The influence of Anglo-Norman on Middle English. As English was undergoing its transformation from a heavily inflected to a more analytic language, it was also being profoundly influenced by the language of its conquerors, Anglo-Norman. This Norman dialect of French, spoken by the ruling elite and the educated classes, infiltrated every aspect of English life, from government and law to literature and everyday conversation. The result was a massive influx of French vocabulary into the English language, enriching its lexicon and leaving an enduring mark on its character. The sheer volume of French loanwords that entered English during the Middle English period is staggering. Estimates suggest that as many as 10,000 French words were adopted into English during this time, many of which remain in common use today. These loanwords were not limited to any particular domain but rather permeated every aspect of life, reflecting the pervasive influence of Anglo-Norman culture. The domains of government, law, and administration were particularly fertile ground for French loanwords. Words like parliament, justice, court, judge, jury, and defendant all entered the English language during this period, reflecting the dominance of Anglo-Norman legal and political institutions. The military sphere was similarly affected, with words like army, navy, soldier, battle, and victory all having their roots in Anglo-Norman. Section 4. The flowering of literature in Middle English. The Middle English period witnessed a remarkable flowering of literature. Geoffrey Chaucer, the father of English poetry, wrote the Canterbury Tales. This collection captures the spirit and vitality of Middle English. Chaucer's work helped elevate English as a literary language. Anonymous authors penned epic poems like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and Piers Plowman critiqued social and religious ills. Middle English literature reflected the changing social, political, and religious landscape of England. Section 1. The Great Vowel Shift, a Sonic Revolution. The transition from Middle English to early modern English was marked by the Great Vowel Shift. This phonetic revolution altered the pronunciation of long vowels, changing the way English is spoken. The causes remain debated, with theories including social mobility and migration. The shift was gradual, unfolding over generations. Long vowels were raised in the mouth. Vowels like the A in father shifted upwards, becoming more like the E in bed. This chain reaction affected nearly all long vowels. The great vowel shift impacted both spoken and written English. Spellings became out of sync with pronunciation, complicating the language. Standardization and the rise of a national language. The great vowel shift shaped English during the early modern period. As England modernized, the need for a standardized English grew. A national language emerged, transcending regional dialects. The London dialect gained prestige and influence. Spread by the printing press and education, it became widespread. Standardization faced detractors and led to linguistic prejudice. Regional dialects were often viewed as inferior. Standardization balanced national unity and linguistic heritage. Section 3. The printing press, a catalyst for linguistic change. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century, a technological innovation with far-reaching consequences, had a profound impact on the English language, accelerating the processes of standardization, literacy, and lexical expansion. No longer confined to handwritten manuscripts, texts could now be reproduced quickly and cheaply, leading to a wider dissemination of knowledge, ideas, and of course, language itself. The printing press acted as a linguistic homogenizing force, promoting a standardized form of written English that transcended regional variations. Printers, often based in London, adopted the prestigious London dialect as their standard, further solidifying its status as the language of learning, literature, and administration. The increased availability of printed materials fueled a dramatic rise in literacy rates. As more people learned to read and write, the demand for printed materials from books and pamphlets to newspapers and broadsides grew exponentially. This virtuous cycle of literacy and printing created a fertile ground for the development and dissemination of new ideas and literary forms. The printing press also facilitated the expansion of the English lexicon. As writers and scholars were exposed to texts from other languages, they readily borrowed words and phrases, enriching the vocabulary of English and reflecting the growing intellectual and cultural ferment of the Renaissance. Section 4. Early Modern English, the language of Shakespeare and the King James Bible.
The great vowel shift, standardization, and the printing press led to early modern English, the language of Shakespeare and the King James Bible.
William Shakespeare, the Bard of Avon, enriched the English language with his plays and poetry.
Phrases like "to be or not to be" and "all the world's a stage" have become ingrained in the language.
The King James Bible, published in 1611, was another landmark of early modern English. Its majestic prose shaped religious and literary life. The expansion of English was transforming in the British Isles, but a new chapter was about to unfold. The age of exploration saw European powers, including England, venturing across the globe. This era marked the beginning of English becoming a global language. English explorers embarked on daring voyages, planting the seeds for the British Empire. From North America to the Caribbean, English settlements emerged. Early colonies faced challenges but clung to their language and customs. This conviction impacted how English spread and interacted with other languages. The British Empire, a linguistic legacy. The British Empire rose to global dominance in the 18th and 19th centuries. Through military might, economic prowess, and diplomacy, Britain amassed a vast colonial empire. This expansion established English as the language of administration, education, and commerce. English unified colonies under a common linguistic umbrella. From India to Africa, English became essential for communication. Education played a pivotal role in spreading English. British-run schools promoted English for social mobility and success. The economic might of the British Empire cemented English dominance. English became the language of commerce and international trade. Section 3. New Worlds, New Englishes, Divergence and Adaptation.
The spread of English through colonization was not a monolithic phenomenon, but rather a multifaceted process that resulted in the emergence of new varieties of English.
As English encountered indigenous languages, other European tongues, and the creative adaptations of its speakers, it underwent a process of divergence and diversification.
In North America, English encountered a linguistic landscape already populated by a multitude of indigenous languages.
While English eventually displaced many of these native tongues, it did not emerge unscathed from these encounters.
Borrowings from indigenous languages, such as canoe, moccasin, and tomahawk, enriched the vocabulary of American English.
In the Caribbean, English encountered a different set of linguistic influences as enslaved Africans brought with them their own languages and cultural practices.
The result was the emergence of Caribbean Creole languages, a fascinating blend of English and West African languages.
As English spread throughout the British Empire and beyond, it continued to evolve and adapt, giving rise to a rich tapestry of regional dialects, accents, and varieties. The rise of a global lingua franca. The 20th century saw the decline of European empires and the rise of the United States. English ascended to a global lingua franca, a language of international communication, commerce, and diplomacy. The economic and military might of the U.S. and the global reach of American culture played a significant role. International organizations adopting English further solidified its status. English became the dominant language of science, technology, and academia. Section 2, American English, a new dialect takes center stage. As English ascended to a global language, American English emerged as a dominant force, shaping the global perception of Standard English. Driven by the cultural and economic influence of the United States, this shift impacted pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar worldwide. Hollywood films exposed global audiences to American accents, slang, and cultural references. The economic dominance of the United States also contributed to the spread of American English. American English textbooks and teaching materials gained popularity worldwide. Section 3, Technology and the global spread of English. The technological revolution of the late 20th and early 21st centuries transformed communication. Computers, the internet, and mobile devices changed how we interact and access information. This revolution accelerated the global spread of English, creating new platforms for linguistic exchange. The internet, as a vast space, has become a hub for English use and dissemination. English dominates websites, social media, and online forums connecting billions worldwide.
Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are virtual town squares. They connect people globally, fostering conversations often in English.
Smartphones have further accelerated English's global spread. With translation apps and English content, smartphones empower global language learning. Technology has also led to new forms of language use like text abbreviations and emojis, and the hybrid language of online gaming communities. English today, a global phenomenon. Today, English stands as a global phenomenon to its current status as the world's most widely spoken language, with an estimated 2 billion speakers worldwide, becoming the language of international communication, commerce, science, diplomacy, and popular culture. English echoes across the globe, connecting people from diverse cultures and backgrounds, and diplomatic negotiations conducted in grand halls of power. Section 2, The Future of English Challenges and Transformations. As we stand at the cusp of a new era shaped by rapid technological advancements, globalization, and shifting geopolitical dynamics, the future of English remains an intriguing and open-ended question. While English enjoys global dominance, its future will be shaped by social, cultural, economic, and technological forces.
Another challenge is addressing inequities in English proficiency. Fluency in English is often seen as a prerequisite for opportunities, creating a linguistic divide that can exacerbate disparities.
The future of English is about understanding its intersection with power, identity, culture, and technology. English, despite its global reach, is one language among many, each with its own unique history, character, and value.